Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Fired Up. My name is Morgan McClintock, and today I'm joined by Nicole Pytel. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hi, Morgan. Hi, everybody.
So today we're going to be talking about click fraud, and this is a massive problem. I just looked up some statistics here, and 27% of organic and direct traffic to websites comes from bots and fake users, according to Imperva. According to Ad Age, $1 of every of marketing budget is lost from every three due to ad fraud. So it's a huge problem, but perhaps a little bit under the radar for a lot of tech brands as they start out on their ad journey.
Yeah, I think we've all heard of click fraud. We know it exists, but we don't really know how it works or how big of an impact it makes. And that's exactly what we're going to learn about today.
Right. So we'll be joined by Rich Kahn, who is the founder and CEO of Anura, and they are an anti-fraud platform. And so we'll be talking to him about what are their motivations. Clearly it's money, but like how do they make the money out of this, the scammers? And why are they filling in those forms? Like I get the ads, you're clicking on the ads, but why are you giving me junk form fills?
Mm.
That's really annoying. And let's just talk to him a bit about what's coming down around the corner here on ad fraud. So I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. Please join me in welcoming Rich Kahn to Fired Up. Rich, hi. Great to have you here on Fired Up. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me today.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And so today we're going to be talking about click fraud. And so before we dive into prevention, let's just talk a little bit about the threat. What exactly is digital ad fraud and how big of a problem is that today?
Digital ad fraud is if you're buying online marketing, any channel, programmatic, search, social, affiliate based, you're paying somebody to do something. And when you pay people to do something on the internet, the cheaters find a way to cheat. And that's pretty much the bottom line. So everyone knows, when I put the example of bots clicking on ads, people know it's a story they've heard over and over. But a lot of people don't pay attention to it and they think, it's not me. But last year, as a global society, we spent over $700 billion in digital marketing. And according to our conservative estimates, 140 billion was stolen by fraudsters. So it's no longer a question of if you have fraud, it's a question of how much fraud are you being affected by. So that's how big of a problem it is. That represents 22% of every dollar spent.
$1 in $5 I'm spending is going to somebody else. Massive.
What most people want to know is who's getting it. And it's hard to tell because we have privacy laws in our country, in Europe, and it tries to hide and protect people, but it also hides and protects the fraudsters. Best guess of I'm working on this for 30-something years, it's organized crime. So if you use the inverse of that, if you're doing digital marketing of any kind, you're actually supporting organized crime.
Organized crime. We're funding it.
So, what's the point of this? Why are they clicking on ads? Like, what's in it for them? Is this like the neighborhood kids running up and ringing my doorbell? It's just fun for them? Like, what's the end goal here for these people?
Money. It's all about the money. $140 billion is what we're talking about. I did read an article that recently, and I don't know if it's true or not, I just read the article from a trusted source. They've estimated that the average fraudster, the average person that's doing this, is making $5 million a year. So this is not a small number. So you're getting anybody with technical experience, generally speaking, overseas. So there's no laws to affect it. They're not breaking any laws. We all know it's stealing, right? It's kind of obvious, it's logical, but it doesn't state that in any law, especially international law. They try to steal the money and they're very successful at it. And it's growing. Like I did a study and a report for a presentation I gave on the history of fraud. And I was like, I want to say 2000, maybe 10 and prior, it was maybe like a $1 or $2 billion problem. And then I think in 2018 is when all of a sudden it started to spike, and it spiked to like 10, then to 20, then to 40. And like I said, now you're sitting at 20. Here we are, 2025 at 140. And we're predicting probably before it, but by 2028, it'll be a $200 billion problem.
Wow. So this might sound like a dumb question. Like the bots are clicking on the ads. How are they actually making the money? What's the mechanism of them doing that so people understand?
Let's go back to the original. You're an advertiser. You own ABC Shop. You advertise. You're paying somebody to do something. So you're paying Google. You're paying Facebook. You're paying somebody to buy that traffic. They in turn pay somebody to buy the traffic from. So, for example, if you're buying from Google, we use Google as an example, one of the biggest, obviously, marketing agencies out there, right? So, if you're looking at Google, for example, Google doesn't generate the traffic that you buy for them. When you set up your campaign, there's a little checkbox that's predetermined and checked that says from partner networks. And they always recommend you check that because they want the volume, they want to spend your money. Well, that's 90% of their volume of traffic. And that's them, that's Google paying somebody to drive traffic to your ad. So if a publisher in that network gets paid by Google, they can, okay, there's two things they can do. There's a lot of things, but generally two things. One, they can deploy bots themselves to attack the ads that are showing up in their feed and get paid. That's them knowing what they're doing. That's a fraudster, direct fraudster. Or it could be somebody who's innocent, has no idea. They have a nice blog site, they have a lot of volume, and you're like, wow, I've got 1 million visitors to my site. I'm making $50,000 a year. If I go buy more traffic that's cheaper than 50 grand, I can arbitrage the traffic. If I could spend 30,000 to make 50,000, that's an awesome return. So they go and they buy traffic, and then they realize, wow, there's cheaper places online to buy traffic, and cheaper places tend to have a lot more fraud because it's not real traffic. That's why it's cheaper. And as they buy cheap traffic, they're injecting more and more fraud into the ecosystem. And that's kind of the one of two ways that it happens, either the knowing way or the innocent way.
Right, because you're innocently buying cheaper traffic to serve your ads to get more impressions on, because you're a small publisher getting some traffic, and I'm reselling those ads, but you're sort of fueling, you're innocently in that instance fueling it. But in the other one, I'm a publisher and I'm knowingly getting revenue from publishing ads and driving bot traffic to it. So there's never anybody clicking on
Right.
these things.
And what's happening, it's a cat and mouse game, right? They're constantly trying to figure out, because let's face it, Google's trying to block it. And there's companies like us that our job is fraud detection. And the fraudsters know this, and they're always trying to find the next hack, the next security hole. Remember, I don't know, well, I guess it still happens today, but like Windows, iPhones, any device, every couple weeks you're getting a new update for that device. And what's the number one update? Security updates. Somebody found a hole in their system and they want to plug it. They roll out a new piece of software. Well, that new software's got 100,000 lines of code. Guess what? There's holes in it. So they're trying to make sure every time it's discovered, somebody hacks and gets around something, they have to roll out an update to do it. Well, it's kind of like what we do. We're focusing, and same thing with Google. Actually, I spoke to the head of fraud at Google. They have 1,000 people on the fraud team at Google. The difference between a company like Google and us is Google has access to just Google traffic. We get to see traffic from every channel out in the marketplace, and each channel has a different type of attack. So that's kind of how it goes. And you got to be careful with it because, like I said, it's a cat and mouse game. It's constantly evolving. It's not a set and forget situation. I've talked to people that, I'm just going to put an IP list, block some IPs. I'm like, IPs mean nothing. We don't own our IPs anymore like we did back in the 90s. Ever go to Starbucks, ever use a cell tower, ever go to a conference, they all share the IP address. So like IP address blocking doesn't work anymore. So you got to get really sophisticated with your ways defending yourself.
Right. So there are different types of these sort of fraud then. I mean, in B2B, click fraud, impression fraud, you mentioned affiliate link scams. Can you just quickly explain what those are briefly so that we are understanding the sort of ecosystem of types of fraud?
Yeah, so you have a lot of different channels of marketing. You have programmatic, so your display ads and your campaigns. It's the number one channel for marketing, and it's got the highest level of fraud. Over 50% of that channel is fraud, sophisticated fraud, 50%. The next channel is affiliates. Affiliates, 45% fraud. It's obvious. You're paying them to drive traffic, drive conversion, drive something. It's obvious. You've got search networks, average 10 to 15% fraud between Google, Yahoo, and Bing are your three biggest search vendors. You got companies like social networks like Facebook or Meta, I should say, TikTok, Twitter, all have different variance levels of fraud. They all have the fraud, and no matter where you turn to buy traffic, nothing's clean. I mean, I even have clients that use us to keep their organic traffic clean.
Right, because a lot of traffic, there's that Verizon report they come out every year saying, a lot of organic traffic is just bots. It's not human traffic.
It's everywhere. So it's at a point where you need to do something about it. Otherwise, you risk your business. It depends on your business model. If you're driving traffic into your network to generate sales of a product and bots get in there, and you rely on digital marketing to drive your sales, what percentage of fraud shuts your business model down? 100% is obvious, right? If you had 100% fraud, that means nothing's converting, nothing's true, but you're spending money and you're not getting anything in value. So 100% we all know, but your business gets shut down for a lot less than that. It could be 20%, it could be 50%, but there is a number that if you get attacked by a certain percentage of fraud, it's going to shut your business down. So you have to stay ahead of it, especially now with AI. So look, we're all familiar with Fraud GPT. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
No, Fraud GP. I mean, I'm totally aware of the massive increase in the AI has had on email fraud and all sorts of different types of things. But tell us about that.
Yeah. So if you go into the dark web, you can search for a product called Fraud GPT and say, write me a bot that does this. And you don't have to be technical as far as development and code, right? You just have to have enough technical experience, which most people have, to deploy it. And what's interesting is you write the bot, you tell it what you want it to do. It actually writes the code. And then you say, how do I deploy this? And it gives you step-by-step directions on how to deploy it. And you're up and running. So back in the day, you had to have very high technical skills to write these bots, to figure them out. And some of the stuff that I'm looking at on our dev desk, the kind of attacks that are coming through are just, they're not written by AI. These are highly skilled developers, but very basic entry level fraud can be done by somebody who doesn't have any programming skills at all. Just a little technical knowledge, which in this age, everybody runs an iPhone. I mean, and everybody can run a chat GPT prompt. You can run a Fraud GPT prompt.
So, if you're advertising online, you're most likely a victim of ad fraud. So, is there any metrics that you can look at? Is there anything that might flag suspicious activity? Are you going to see an influx of something? Or if you are advertising, what should you be on the lookout for?
That's the hardest thing because most people are so used to buying traffic with fraud baked in that they're used to the metrics. So in other words, I said programmatic. We'll pick on programmatic. It's the biggest channel. So programmatic is display ads, which is, runs the internet, and video ads. And you start buying a lot of traffic on that and you fine tune your system. And now you've got your conversion level where you want it, but you're still ingesting on average 50% fraud. So what metric do you look at? You just walked into a campaign not knowing, but you adjusted your metrics to try to make it make sense for you so you can continue spending money. If there was a spike in fraud, you would see a reduction in ROAS, return on ad spend, or ROI, right? Either way. If you saw an automatic, and we've seen that, we have clients that will come to us and say, hey, running this campaign for 10 years has been great. All of a sudden it tanked. We don't know what happened. We think it might be fraud. And then we'll do a scan and find out for them. So you're looking for changes in fraud are possible, but if you walk into a channel and you're fresh into the channel or you've been doing it for 10 years, you have fraud. I already know it. I've done probably over 1,000 scans of people's sites myself personally. And I can tell you that everybody's got it. It's just to what extent. And typically I'll always ask them, like, what's your tolerance for fraud? Like, how much fraud are you willing to accept? The answer almost always is zero. Like, they don't want to pay for a penny of fraud. So if I can identify the 50% that's fraudulent and give you a game plan to mitigate that so that now that budget, instead of going to fraud where it doesn't convert, goes into a converting audience, oh, it's a big win. That's why our product has been growing because it makes sense, especially in this day and age. Like fraud 10 years ago was a harder, selling a fraud solution 10, 15 years ago. We've been selling it since 8 years now, but 10, 15, 20 years ago would be very difficult because fraud wasn't as big of an issue. I look at it this way, like there's fraud everywhere, right? How many of us remember waking up from a hotel room, opening up our door and seeing a USA Today at our foot, right? That was just a standard. You went to a hotel and it was always there. And you know what? They counted you as a reader. So when they sold the advertising in the newspaper, they told you that we have X number of readers, and those readers included everybody that got one delivered to their hotel room, which may or may not read the paper. Well, that's not considered fraud, but it's a misrepresentation of the numbers knowingly. So is that really, is that fraud? So again, it existed. The only difference now is things are very trackable. Like imagine being able to identify if somebody actually picked up the paper and read the paper, which articles they read. Well, that's what we have today in the internet. We have extreme, and everyone's doing all kinds of crazy analytics around that, how long they spent on the page, how many words they read, how fast they read. I mean, it's amazing the kind of analytics you can get, but you didn't have that back in the day.
Right. And I guess the level of ad fraud now has got to a point where, okay, even if I'm spending $10,000 a month on Google search or Google display, half of that could be wasted. It's therefore worth having like an anti-fraud system like Anura, that it's worth integrating that, getting it set up. It's worth the cost of that. The payback comes a lot quicker because the market's coming towards you. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then look at the scary thing right now. So we're estimating on a conservative side, 22% of every dollar spent is fraud. What happens if that hit 30 or 40 or 50 or 70? There is a number that will shut the whole business model down. Where, and this happened back in 2000. With the dot-com bubble bursting, a lot of that was because you had advertisers that were like, all of a sudden you can advertise on the internet. And I remember, so I don't know if anybody in the audience knows what a CPM rate is for programmatic advertising, but when you buy advertising on programmatic, just to give a quick update, you buy it on a cost per thousand basis, how many thousand impressions you generate and how much you pay for it. Today's rate is $2, and you can go anywhere you want and easily buy the traffic for $2. If you add filters on, like, hey, I only want to have a product that's for women. I don't want to pitch women. I don't want to pitch women in Seattle. Heck, I only want to pitch women in Seattle when it's raining. You have all this amazing data that you can use. And as you do that, the cost goes up, right? And I've seen CPMs as like 15 to $30 on the high side. There might be some special places that go even higher than that, but that's about the end of it. Back in 1999, 2000, there was a 6-month waiting list on Yahoo to get the advertising there. And your starting bids were $60 to $80 CPM.
Wow. Yeah.
Now you're talking 25 years ago. So in today's standard, that's probably like $150, $200 CPM. I mean, so it was such a wild thing. So everybody jumped on board. Everybody wanted to be digital. They were spending money like crazy. And I'll say this, fraud was at the heart of it because there were, maybe it wasn't bots clicking on ads, but what it was, we used to call them banner incinerators. So what they would do is there would be these little programs that would throw banners up and they'd be all over the place. And it was like, okay, nobody's really looking at the message. Nobody's getting the message, but they're showing them and they're getting credit for them. Like back in 2000, I don't know if you remember, some of these things you'd go to a banner page and they still exist today, and you'd have 100 ads on the page.
Just ridiculous. Yeah. It would just be a wall of ads.
Right. There was no value there. So what happened was everybody started realizing, doing math. And then when the quarterly reports came out for Q1 of 2000, everyone's realizing we're spending all this money on digital marketing and getting no return because fraud was involved, as well as incentivize and weird ways of getting, or just to get the impression out. And it shut the whole business model. That's when the dot-com bubble burst. That's why it burst. That was one of the big reasons for it, because everyone pulled out at the same time, and everybody's business model was supported by ads. Anybody supported by ads shut down. Tons of businesses went out of business. So again, what happens if that happens today? If that number, that 22% hits a certain number, it's going to get to the point where everybody starts pulling out and the whole market's going to collapse.
It's the tragedy of the commons. Classically, everyone individually benefits, but if we all do it, then, there's nothing left. And so all the fraudsters are going to, gradually sort of parasitically kill off the ad stream, the revenue stream. So there's clearly a financial impact here, but there's also like an impact on your metrics. I mean, I see junk form fills come through, from the bot, and then it counts as a CPA, and you've got to kind of filter all that stuff out. But, it interrupts all of your metrics, and therefore perhaps the signal on what's working, the messaging that you have, the type of creative. Just talk to us a little bit about the non-financial impact of ad fraud.
Yeah, so there's a lot behind the scene. Okay, so let's use the lead form. So we'll go with the lead now, right? So why does a bot fill out a form? Right? So it makes no sense, right?
It wants the guide because the stuff is so great. Even the bots want this, is what I'm thinking.
So what ends up happening is they realize that the fraudsters are smart enough. Again, these are smart people, right? They realize if they generate enough clicks to a landing page and no conversion, they're going to get shut down by either programmatic or a smart smart media buyer. Something's going to happen. So for every so many clicks, they know they have to generate some type of back-end conversion. And a lead form is easy because, Morgan, I can get your information online. I can get your phone number, your email address. It's all there, right? There's databases of real people's information online that you can download, fill the bot, and the bot will come along and fill out the form. Let's say it's save money on car insurance, right? It's a form to fill, I want to save money on car insurance. So they put Morgan's information, phone number, email address, hit submit. That lead now goes to a data verification process to say, do I have the right information? They say yes. Within seconds, it's handed off to somebody at a call center. The call center then picks up the phone and calls Morgan, and they just broke TCPA compliance. So now they're on the hook for a lawsuit. In addition to that, they processed the lead that they wasted time and money and they paid for. They sent off a signal, let's say if they're buying from Google, to say, hey, we got a conversion, send me more of this traffic. So they perpetrate the fraud further, and then let's face it, if you didn't fill out the form and they're calling you and you don't recognize the number nowadays, you don't answer the phone, right? So what happens? They call you more and hopefully to get you on the phone. And at times you might just get on the phone. What do you want? Like I see the same number coming in. What do you need? And find out. So again, now you're spending more money on call center resources to try to get somebody on the phone who's not expecting a call. So you've got all these negative benefits. And again, if you make enough of these calls, like if you're generating 1 million form fills a month and 22% of them are fraudulent and you're calling 220,000 people a month, your TCPA violation risk goes way up. You start creating a brand issue now because now people are really concerned with how'd you got my information versus why are you calling me? So all that negative benefit, and that's just on a lead. E-commerce is even worse because you might be sending product out. Now you lost the hard dollars on product, shipping, fulfillment. Oh, by the way, if you get a chargeback, there's chargeback fees. You get enough chargebacks, you lose your ability to do credit card transactions. I mean, it's devastating to a company. And you talked about the other thing. You talked about the analytics. If you're getting 50% of your traffic is coming in, or even 22%, whatever it is, you're making making good marketing decisions based on bad data, which gives you a bad result. So now you sometimes could hurt yourself even more because you don't have the right information at your fingertips. So all these things play into why you need to be doing something actively, proactively right now against fraud.
Let's shift from reactive to proactive. How do you get to be proactive? In today's day and age, like what does a modern ad fraud detection system look like?
So the way it works at the heart, right? So let's look at it this way. There's an organization called TAG, the Trustworthy and Accountability Group. They're worldwide, and they've set up an example. They actually have a certification process called a TAG Certified Against Fraud. And it's a seal that you can earn either as an agency or as a fraud solution. And what they do is they've got this big report that they run you through and check to see if you're following the industry standards. So there's a set of industry standards, they run through it and they follow it. So what they've done in the certification process, like all certification processes, they started naming and giving convention to it. So instead of calling it fraud, they call it IVT, invalid traffic, which most of us have heard of. What most of us haven't heard about is how they subcategorize that into GIVT, which is general invalid traffic, basic bots, data center attacks, things like that. And then SIVT, which is sophisticated invalid traffic, which is really what we're talking about here. In order to identify sophisticated invalid traffic, you need to collect a lot of data. I can't speak for other solutions, but I know our solution collects over 800 data points the second somebody lands on a landing page. We know how the data is supposed to look, how it interacts with each other. We're not looking at your name. We're not looking at your phone number. We're not looking at PII, right? We're not looking at that. We're looking at how you connected to this website. And within a second, we can respond back and say, hey, this is a real person or this is fraudulent. And once we identify it's fraudulent, programmatically, we give you that information that you can then do something with. So for one thing, would say, hey, this Morgan is not a real guy. Don't let him fill out the form. Don't let him process a credit card. Don't fill in the blank, whatever the client wants to do. So you can be very proactive. So now imagine all of a sudden you get 22% of the traffic coming in as fraudulent and you're blocking it from filling out a form. So you don't fire your conversion pixel, which tells Google, hey, I didn't like that traffic. I only like the traffic that converted that was considered real people. And now you start shaping the traffic that these guys are sending you. And as you start shaping it, the quality of traffic goes up, the spam leads that you're getting go down, and your ROAS goes up.
Right. Am I still paying for the ad? Like, is there a mechanism to sort of say, hey, look, I paid for this click. It was a fake click. Does Google offer a way to sort of credit you back for that click? I get the sort of, okay, the traffic it sends you in future is better and you get, but do they have a mechanism to go, oh yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, there's a form on Google where you can go to submit for credits. They don't pay out often because they're Google, all right? But I'll give you an example. I had a guy that came to us before he started working with us, and every month he was applying for, I want to say, six-figure credit. And one month he got a refund of $3. Like, it was just a slap in the face. Like, it's not even worth putting in the form. I found an article that was kind of interesting. It says that I think 10% of the time they will give a credit, and of that, they end up giving 30%. So really, when you do the math, for every dollar you submit, you might get 3 cents back. So we prefer to practice the art of avoidance. But again, if you're spending a lot of money, you might have a big relationship with Google. You might be able to push them a little bit and get more of a credit back. But yeah, again, when you're talking about, quarter of $1 trillion company, they don't like people telling them how to bill their clients.
Yeah. So you're preventing, once people are on your site, you're detecting them and making sure that they don't go further. And also, I guess part of the service is making sure that the ads are not served on known, as we were saying before, known fraudulent parts of the network. And that Google partner network will burn through your budget very quickly. But you've got your own sort of layer on top of that to sort of say, hey, don't.
Once that device comes in, we identify it's bad. We can instruct Google or any search local network to stop sending that type of traffic.
So you talked a little bit about Fraud GPT, and I want to just touch on AI. Like, clearly it's impacting the level of fraud, which we've seen year on year increase and no doubt will increase faster. How's it helping on the other side for prevention?
We have tested AI. We use an machine learning that we've built in house, and we love it. The problem with AI, it's kind of like a child. You tell them, don't do this. But, as they mature, they do their own thing. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a machine to do what we say to do. So we've developed a certain path to do it. I mean, the nice thing with AI, depending on how you use it, the machine learning that we develop, we're really proud of and we're happy with, and it works great. We've tested AI for us, and we prefer our system better. It gives a better result for us, at least the way we develop it. But what you could do is use AI to run through all the different data and identify additional patterns that maybe your engineering team needs to look at. It just gives you another tool to really crunch data. And let's face it, my developers are not going to go through hundreds of millions of visitors a day and try to find a pattern. It's just not feasible. It's not how the human works, right? So what you got to do is you got to use some type of automation tool like a machine learning or an AI, and you can build a model that does it, flags traffic as certain things, and then you go and investigate and figure out what you're going to do with it. It's another tool, and as new tools come out, the bad side has it, so you got to have it on the good side to help. And that's just how it works.
So you mentioned, we all know the bad guys are always going to find a loophole in something. Is there a risk maybe that fraudsters are getting harder to track simply because privacy regulations are getting tighter? Is something that's supposed to help us, could that be hurting us here in terms of fraud?
Oh, of course it is, because the same rules that protect us for our personal privacy protect us from knowing who the fraudster is. How cool would it be to find a big ring of fraud and shut them down? But because privacy is there, they bounce off of a couple of servers and you can't get that information. It's all private and protected. In the United States, if someone commits fraud and I have their IP address, I can go to their vendor. Let's say it's Verizon Fios. I can go to their vendor, get a court subpoena, and they'll tell me who owned that IP, who was using that IP address at that time. So now I have an address because it's fine. It's a cable modem. So I'm going to have the physical address and I can start the process. You can start the investigation there. But if you're a fraudster, you're not going to run off your own IP address because that would be stupid, right? So you got to bounce off of other networks. So if you guys are familiar with the Tor browser, that's one of the gateways to get onto the dark web, it bounces off of 5 international servers, and you're not going to be able to get a subpoena for one of those countries to give you the data. It's just not going to happen. So it hides them, protects them. So again, we're not in the business of trying to shut the businesses down because it's just way too difficult to do that accurately. So our job is to help protect our clients and put up a front that's so difficult to get around. I was doing a meeting with my sales team, and I said, it's kind of like, I don't know if I think it was ADT that had the commercial out. The thief walks up to the house and sees the ADT side and says, I'm just going to go next door. They realize there's a front. No, I guess face it. If a real professional thief wants to get inside your house, doesn't matter what kind of alarm system you have, they're going to figure it out, right? If they can get into banks, they can get into your house. But the typical fraudster that's coming along sees that. It's like, you know what? 1 in 4 homes are protected, or 1 in 5 homes are protected by an alarm system. I'm just going to go to one of the other 3 homes. They're all on the same street. They probably all have the same stuff. Let me just go one of the other ones.
Yeah, that makes good sense. So already the level of fraud here is significant. You said 22%. What emerging threats or maybe new forms of fraud are you seeing, or should we sort of be bracing for in the next sort of 1 or 2 years?
Well, when it comes to advertising, I think they're just constantly looking at new ways to get around any system that's put up. Let's face it, most of these guys are developers. Developers love challenges and hate being told they can't do something. I know because I'm a developer. Say that, especially when there's a lot of money on the line. So every week we're coming up with new rules and heuristics for our system because Freud keeps changing that much. But the way we have it dialed in, we have, let's say, a couple 100 million visitors a month that we're scanning. I'm sorry, a couple 100 million visitors a day that we're scanning. And if our machine learning fires off and says, "Hey, I've got something going on," like we just this last attack we found, it was 10,000 visits. So it's not a lot, but hey, there's an anomaly here that we need to address. How do we address it? Let's take a look at it, see if it's a real threat. If it's a real threat, let's fix it. If it's not a real threat, train the machine learning to understand it's not a real threat. And at the end of the day, they're constantly looking at new ways. And this last one that we just did was we were actually able to see their code. They were using AI to get around our system. Our team was able to put together a new update to stop that from happening. But again, we don't know we have a loophole until somebody figure like we have hackers in house. Their job is to get around our system and they know all of our tricks, right?
Yeah.
So they know everything that we look for, how we look for it. So they've got the best odds of getting around our system. And if they find a loophole, then the other team gets to work on building a fix for it, or they work together and they do the fix. But every time we see somebody break through our system, constantly looking around, trying to figure out how they did it, accessing their code. And we have ways of doing all that. So we can identify what they did to get around it and solve it. So I just think that's going to get more and more advanced with AI because, like, some people would look at, okay, you asked before about how do I tell if I have fraud? There's tools like Microsoft Clarity Insights or Hotjar where they record the screen. So back in the day, you'd be able to look at your screen and say, okay, I've got, let me look at my transactions. And you'd see the mouse go up, cross, down, click. Everything was very systematic and perfect. Okay, that was bot. Where a human will kind of float around and look, and it's such a different experience. But now AI bots make it look like real people on the recording. So first off, nobody wants to sit there and go through tens of thousands of video recordings. Nobody's got the time for that. And even if you did, it's too late because the damage is already done. You already paid for it. It's already gone through. It's already made a transaction. You're just looking after the fact. So you need something a little bit more proactive for that.
You've opened up a lot of eyes today. A lot of listeners here are working at startups. So let's say that I'm a CMO at a startup and I'm thinking about launching, my first paid campaign. I'm going to spend 10 grand a month. That's a big chunk of change for me at my startup. What are a couple of things that you would tell me to do today to try and fraud proof this as much as I can?
I would stick with the majors. So I would stick with Google and Facebook specifically. They tend to have lower fraud levels. If you're buying on Google, I would uncheck the box for partner networks for sure. I would not advertise on Google Display Network because it's a programmatic network with averaging 50% fraud. So again, with a 10,000 budget, you should be able to fulfill that budget between those two channels. And it's not going to be fraud free, but it's going to give you your lower levels of fraud because between search and social, they tend to have lower levels of fraud. If you need to go programmatic, you need a solution. You can't go blind. Half your budget will be lost. So there's just certain channels like affiliate marketing you got to stay out of. You're not prepared for that. But again, if you get a small budget tenant, that's where I'd start. And then as you grow, we have certain levels of packages with us, but we also have a company that we've set up so that small companies that are getting started can take advantage of our technology without blowing the bank. So we have things like that. So there's always ways of getting some help. But like I said, just those two simple tricks. If you stick with Facebook and you stick with Google, uncheck the box from partner networks. Don't go on the display network. If you take that advice, you'll be cleaner than if you just went out and started spending in different locations.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And so, it really sounds like as we were talking, I'm reminded of like the antivirus companies are there. They're busy, updating their heuristics to identify new and emerging threats because people can come in and you could get ransomware, and that's a way that you could lose money. This is directly analogous, but the revenue source is much more immediate and easier to access, it occurs to me, because they just put up their publishing network and off they go. But you're instantly in, you're in the same day-to-day updating of the model, discovering new types of threat, and they're heavily incentivized to get around your system. For many advertisers, they may not be already using a platform like this, but they absolutely they should if they're not already. What other advice would you have for marketers as they're thinking about blocking ad fraud?
Well, step one, and we do this with everybody that we talk to on the phone, is step one is find out how much of a fraud problem you have.
Yeah.
We do a free scan because we just want to give you, put some numbers in front of you. So like either light the fire, hey, you got a problem today that you need to solve today, or it's going to be a problem, or hey, it's an emanating problem. It's starting to, you can make some financial decisions, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. So the nice thing we do is we want to do a free trial for our clients because we want to make sure we're solving a problem for them. Like it does me no good if I bring somebody on and they really don't have much of a fraud problem. Like let's say it costs them more to use my service than it does to pay for the fraud. I'm a developer. I want to solve a problem. If I'm not solving the problem, then we should work together.
No, that's fair. That's fair. You need to get to a scale. So there's a certain scale where it makes a service like this.
Well, think about this. Let's say you start with that $10,000 budget, right? And you have a 22% fraud. It's $2,200, right? It's money, but it may not kill you in the beginning. Now, what if that was 100,000 or $1,000,000? Different number, different situation. Now you're like, okay, it makes sense to spend a couple bucks to have a solution in place to help me mitigate that, identify where it's coming from, and go move my budget to an area where it works. Because we talk to agencies all the time, and they're like, if I can get a 5% increase OAS for my client, it's a win. Because if I can go get 3 different tech stacks for like a fraud, for compliance, for something else, all of a sudden I'm making these little changes with these small little increases. Next thing you know, the client loves us. And that's kind of what it's all about.
That's huge. Paid media is difficult and getting harder and harder to stand out. And ad fraud is just adding to the cost of that or taking away its inefficient spend. So if you can block that out the gate, it's a straightforward win. Excellent advice. Thank you for your time today. So Rich Kahn is the founder and CEO of Anura, which is an ad fraud prevention platform, as we've just been talking about. So yeah, Rich, really enjoyed this conversation. Eye-opening, concerning, but I'm glad you're out there with your team preventing that. If people want to get in touch with you, where should they go?
I'm easy to get in touch with. I'm on LinkedIn. Rich Kahn. It's easy to find. I've got a big following right now. Or you can just reach me at rich@anura.io. Easy to get on email. And I'm pretty responsive in email and in LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thanks for your time, Rich. It was great talking to you.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Talk to you soon.